Tangi nui kei runga, papatū nuku kei raro, ko ngā tangata kei Wainganui. Kia koutou, ngā tangata hikoi, ngā mihi nui, tihei mauri ora. No te moana a toi ahau, engari he mihi ana ki ngā tohu o nehi o te whanganui atara e noho nei au. Ko ngā te Pākehā tōku iwi ko Stephen Dunn. I'm here with my colleagues Linda and Bernice, and they'll be able to answer any questions people have in more detail because they're much smarter than me. But I wanted to start by saying it's important to make a distinction for the work we do, between pathways and access. For the Walking Access Commission, our governing legislation, the Walking Access Act, is all about access, and pathways are someone else's job. So if you look at your window, the road outside, what would have been the terrace if we'd been meeting properly today, and all its tar-sealed mates is already public access. For most of you, your advocacy and work focuses on how to turn that access into pathways. So what percentage is footpath versus car, how bikes are separated from pedestrians, and so on. And most transport planning is urban focused, and that's for a good reason. That's where most people are, it's where most journeys happen, and where most access already exists. But for us, Arahikoi Aotearoa, we tend to work in the places where public access is not so clear or well established, so rural and peri-urban areas. We are advocates of active transport, but with a small a rather than a big A. So a large part of our job is supporting outdoor recreation, and another part is supporting active transport. There's only a small overlap, I guess, in our Venn diagram with Living Streets Aotearoa and some of the rest of you in this meeting today, but it's an important overlap. So the question that Alan gave me to answer today is, what makes a good walkway? What does Arahikoi Aotearoa look for when we set out to create access for a new walkway? Perhaps we can move to the next slide. The question for us is a relatively easy one to answer because it's laid out in legislation in section 11 of our Act, and it's a lot of legal language, but essentially the things that we're legally obliged to look at are whether there's access to lakes or rivers, to the beach, to conservation land, to areas of scenic or recreational value, or to fishing and hunting. But next slide. Although it's not in the law, the most important priority for us is whether a community wants it or not. So normally that means there is a group of community volunteers who give their time to make it happen, like the people in this photo here. But the other things we're looking for, does the walkway go somewhere? Does it connect to communities, or does it connect communities together? Does it go somewhere special, like a waterfall, for instance? Does it connect to existing access, or does it create a network of trails? And then we'll also consider other benefits such as tourism, health, and environmental benefits. Most walking infrastructure sits on New Zealand's formed road network, but there's also an important role for off-road tracks and trails. These paths that do not follow built roads are both safer and more enjoyable for walkers normally. But retrofitting off-road tracks and trails into urban environments is expensive, and it's time-consuming, and it's complicated. It involves well-considered planning and negotiation to secure access across all the appropriate land. So next slide. A good example of this in practice is the Pukekohe 5 Summits Walkway, which was created recently, a few years ago. It's one of the most popular tracks on our Find My Adventure trail database. And we think part of that is because it starts and finishes at a railway station, so it's very easy to get to. But it also has a lot of other things going for it. Next slide. So the 5 Summits track was designed and constructed by the Pukekohe Tramping Club. It was their gift to local people, and it celebrates their 50th birthday. It connects Pukekohe's 5 volcanic summits of Pukekohe Hill, Belmont Rise, Cape Hill, The Rock, and Roosevelt Park. It's a pretty important addition to the Auckland region's network of trails, particularly with Cody dieback these days. And it's important for people are walking for recreation, but it's also important because Pukekohe is becoming more urban, so it serves as a network of walkways for those urban walkers. The walkers and bikers, it's because it's also a cycling path in some places, can do all 5 summits and 21 kilometres, or they can just take in the summits of their choosing. It cleverly links together existing paths and parks and reserves so that the walkers spend the minimum amount of time possible on roads. And next slide. Most importantly, it's fun. And next slide. The escarpment track, which is part of Te Aotearoa, is another immensely popular track that meets all those criteria of strong community support, close connection to public transport, peri-urban, but very close to a significant urban centre. And that's another one that we see large numbers of people visiting on our track database. In recent months, we've spent a lot of time submitting on long-term plans and regional transport plans for local councils around the motu. Invariably, we say the same sorts of things in those submissions. We note the importance of investing in walking and biking, the value of connected networks of tracks and trails, and the need to preserve and expand public access to the outdoors, because that's kind of our bread and butter. Our interest in those long-term transport plans is twofold. We're interested in good outdoor recreation opportunities for people, but we're also interested in good active transport networks for people. Unfortunately for councils with little money to spend, these transport infrastructure plans often turn into either or debates. We can dip into the wallet for walking paths, or we can have roads. Our many submissions argue that this dichotomy is not real. Most off-road tracks and trails, whether for cycling, walking or horse riding, are not just for transport, they're also for our mental and physical health, outdoor recreation, and for important community amenities. But their role in transport is particularly important because they change the way that we travel. When kids can walk to school along a bush path rather than along the road, they're happy, they're exploring nature, and they're safe. But they also create more space on the roads for the people who need it for other things. Fewer parents driving their kids to school during peak hours means more space and smoother traffic flows for hardworking trucks and tradies and couriers. It increases the town's happiness and healthiness and connectedness, and it frees up the road for the types of traffic that give people those kind of good jobs. It's tricky to retrofit these types of off-road paths into our towns though, and it is much cheaper than trying to fit increasingly different modes of transport onto a single road. So cars, buses, trucks, bikes, walkers, e-scooters, you know all the list. So we're making a better, more sustainable investment in all our people if we give people the opportunity to combine their transport, their outdoor recreation, and their happiness in a single bush-clad off-road journey. And that frees up space and money to invest in the changes that make our roads better places for drivers to be too. For this reason, we've invested a lot of energy in recent years to develop off-road pathways in peri-urban areas before they develop into urban areas. So the photo you're looking at the moment is one of our regional projects protecting and enhancing trails in the north of Auckland. Our Puhoi to Mangawhai Trail project is creating a massive network of trails linking Northland to the big city. We're collaborating with Ngāti Manuhiri, Auckland Transport, Auckland Council, and the Matakana Coast Trails Trust. The result's going to be a world-class shared sustainable commuting and recreation trail in one of the fastest growing areas in New Zealand. The calculations suggest it's going to bring $217 million worth of benefits for a cost of only $50 million. Next slide. And to the south of Auckland, we've produced our Connecting Franklin North Waikato report, which calls for a network of off-road tracks and trails connecting North Waikato towns of Pokeno, Pukekohe and Tuakau to their awa. The report focuses on access to and along the river, and it would support recreation, tourism and commuting, walking, cycling, running and horse riding. We're now working on a plan to implement those key projects. It's going to involve council staff, central government, developers, local community volunteer groups and residents. We need more projects like these to help plan and build the walking and cycling infrastructure we need to accommodate more active transport. A successful strategy to increase the number of walking and cycling journeys and horse riding journeys, because we also cover that at our work, will need to develop off-road as well as on-road walking pathways. In rural and peri-urban areas, this means creating public access to support people on the fringes of towns and cities, so they've got access to their schools, to their shops and workplaces and community facilities. Public access also needs to link towns and communities to each other, and it needs to link people to outdoor recreation opportunities. In urban areas, we also need off-road walking pathways. This is going to be harder to achieve because the roads and buildings are already in place, but it's equally important because it benefits more walkers. Nō reira, ka tia konei I ngā kōrero, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.